I remember, yes, that we started rehearsing with Yannis, the director. We started rehearsing for another project, for another film. But I think there was a conflict and something happened, and then that film didn't happen. So we stopped rehearsing. And then after some months, Yannis called me and he told me, Aggeliki, I have a new idea. And let's get together because I want to make a film and I want to tell you about it. And so we started working for Matchbox. And this is how we started.
So this is his first feature film. What made you trust him? What did he tell you about this project? How did he present it to you?
You know, I liked a lot the idea that Yannis wanted, and he was, he was sure about that. He wanted to make a film that was out of the box. Let's say he didn't want to make another Greek film because he didn't like the films that they were made back then, and he wanted to tell his own story, with his own words and his people around him that he wanted to work with. So the basic idea was that we would all gather together and we would co-create the script of the film based on a lot of improvisations. So that was the first thing that he told me that I liked a lot. That he said, I'm tired of all that. I'm tired of Greek films. I want to make a film that it is made in a totally different way. And would you like to be part of that adventure? And of course, I wanted to, and I liked very much the idea.
Yes, because I was wondering how he worked with his actors, because what he's doing is very specific. I can see it in a lot of his film, and it's not exactly realism. It looks like realism, but at the same time, it's heightened. It has an intensity, and it almost becomes hysterical realism or hyper-realism. So I was always wondering, how does he work with you, for the style of delivering your lines?
Well, for Matchbox, we've rehearsed a lot, actually. We've rehearsed for 6 months, which is a lot for a film, and we improvised all the time. And there was a basic storyline because he told us that the story of the film was, he had in mind a theatrical play which is called The Father by August Strindberg. So with that theatrical play in his mind, he told us this will be like a story, but based on this story, we will improvise and we will make our own script and our own film. So having that in mind, we improvised a lot. And we were all together and also just the two of us. But mainly all together, the family, the basic members of the family, we spent a lot of time improvising. And I remember that they had rented an apartment which was in a neighborhood in Athens, and we were going there to rehearse. And after a while, the neighbors thought that we were a real family because we were fighting.
That's a real family in Greece, right?
Yeah, exactly. They said, "Oh, this family, it's a real family," because they're fighting all the time and they're, cursing at each other and in a Balkan way, And so we spent a lot of time in that specific apartment in Athens. And when we were rehearsing, Yannis was always telling us, yes, but now you have to go further in terms of what you said about hyper-realism, that more or less he was more or less pushing us to go further and deeper to what we were doing in every way. Maybe further meant that you have to shout louder or you have to invent something new. I remember the monologue that I say on the telephone, that monologue that we worked a lot on this monologue. Every time he was telling me, now we have to go further and let's find something else. Let's find something more twisted. Let's see what else this girl could say to her friend. Make it a bit darker. Make it even more disgusting or even more. He was always pushing us. So that is his way of creating. He wasn't pushing us in a bad way, but he was always, I mean, pushing us to some kind of edge.
He managed that, yeah. So the majority of his films feature violence and abuse of language, but I heard him in an interview, he was saying, I'm not making violent films, I'm making films about violence, examining violence. Having worked with him, do you have a sense of what he could mean?
I think Yannis, you know, has a very specific gaze and on Greek society, and I think he understands a lot of things that are creeping and that are hidden. And I remember back then he was always telling us about Greek society and the violence, the hidden violence in Greek society. So he was always trying somehow to show what was hidden and what was underneath and what was lying, you know, and nobody could see how violent is.
Bring it out in a way.
Yeah, he wanted to bring it out. So he wanted to somehow make people see what they could not see. So I think this is if I remember well, this is one thing that wanted to do with this film, like be able and let ourselves explode and not judge ourselves and not try to, you know, be like, okay, we're going to make another film and we have to respect everyone and we have to be okay and not show what we want to show. He wanted to do the opposite, actually. He wanted to show that what you cannot show or you are not allowed to show or no.
Please tell me, were you laughing during the rehearsals or the...
Yeah, of course. No.
You must have. Yeah, I'm just curious if you were laughing as well.
Of course we were laughing because we were improvising a lot and we were, you know, we were doing so many things with our mother and our father and my brother and you know, we would do so many Greek things that Greek people do on a Sunday or what, you know, also this film refers to a very specific area of Athens. It's a neighborhood of Athens where these people are supposed to live. And so we actually went to the real neighborhood and we spent time. Yeah. Because Yannis wanted always that kind of realism and reality. So we actually went to the neighborhood, we spent time there, we walked around, we went to some bars, because he wanted us to you know, to realize how these people live and where they live and what surrounds them. And they are, of course, like middle class or middle low class people, and Yannis wanted to tell their story in a very realistic way. I remember he was also telling us a lot of, I mean, the references. He was always telling us about Cassavetes films, like to watch again and again his films. And also he was telling us about Mike Lee a lot and Ken Loach also.
That would be my question if he was here today, because I was so scared to show this to an international audience. And I saw it to the people in the office and my co-programmer, and I was like, should I show it? Should I disappear? And he was like, no, it actually reminds me of British social realism, some kitchen sink dramas, a lot of Lee, Nil by Mouth. And I meant to ask him if he has been influenced at all from this.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think he definitely, because he was telling us to watch that kind of films, and also he wanted us. And I remember I was also watching on YouTube some videos of some singers that are singing in that places, in that bars, or you know, he wanted us to be as much as involved as much as possible in a way that we wouldn't like pretend to be the characters, or we wouldn't imitate the characters, but he wanted us to be 100% there. But that meant that we were laughing a lot during the rehearsals, a lot. Because we were doing all these cliche things that a family does on a Sunday, or when they go out, or when they fight, of course. Or we were doing a lot of things. It was very, very nice. And also, it was my first film. So I've learned so many, I've learned so many things, because I was like improvising all the time. So, which is very useful for an actor that has, I was just out of the drama school. So it was, you know, a huge lesson for me as well.
Great. My last question, and then we're going to ask the audience to pose some questions, is I mentioned it before in my introduction that 2022, when the film came out, was 2 years before 2004, where there was this national euphoria and we thought money was flowing and we were hosting the Olympics. We were feeling great. And then these films comes and it was quite the opposite. Shows this family, you know, in this existential panic and such darkness. And do you think that he kind of was sensing the undercurrents?
Yeah, I think Yanis, as I told you before, had always, he was somehow, he never believed that euphoria, or that you know, Greece was doing well. He saw the facade of it, and he was always telling us that this is a lie, or that, you know, things are not as they seem to be, and there is something totally different going on. And of course, being an artist, and this is also for me, it's a personal thing, being an artist in Greece was never easy, and back then was also never easy, because, you know, nobody helps you somehow, and you have to do it all by yourself. So we never believed that things were going well back then, because, you know, when you're an artist, you always have to struggle. In Greece back then, even more. Now it's also, but back then it was even worse, because you were also feeling that you were like some crazy person that, you know, was seeing a totally different reality from the reality around us, and it was strange. But you know, it was. Yeah, I think Yanis wanted to show that things weren't going well at all.
Right.
They weren't, of course.
So, does anybody have a question for Aggeliki? We have an audience, Aggeliki. You can see it.
Ah, oh, nice cinema.
I know.
Oh, nice.
We're so in Alps as well.
You saw Alps, yeah.
Part of this season, yeah. Anybody has a question? Yeah. Sorry, I turn it back.
So my question is, this film and Dogtooth are both about, well, from my perspective, the transfer of pain from a strong male protagonist to his family. So
can you hear, Aggeliki? I'll help after. Please pose
and
the
then
question.
so the question is, why do you think that was so prominent in both films? Why do you think both male directors chose that as something to reflect from Greek society at the time?
So if I heard correctly, both films, Dogtooth and Matchbox, have a male protagonist who is in struggle, you said? Or
yeah, it's like transfers their pain.
Transfers their pain to the family, and it's common theme to both films. Do you think there is a reason for that?
Of course there is a reason, because Greek society was back then and still is full of it's a patriarchal society. So it was very obvious that if you want to do a film about Greek society, you would put the father, because it's, you know, a huge thing still. And back then it was even worse, but still it is. Anyway, I'm laughing now, but it's not so nice. And I mean, you know, it's been very, very hard the last 20 years because Greece is still, you know, it's very difficult for things to change. And the father figure and the male figure is still something very, very dominant in Greek society, which is, it's sad, but it is true still.
But also, you know, a lot of these films that are featured in this season have to do with family. As Athina Rachel Tsagari is saying, we are obsessed with family. is very central in our culture and our society, and a lot of these films look at it through a critical lens. That are yeah. So it's not only these two films. I think it's a lot of films of that period, post 2000s.
Oh, yeah, because it's an issue still. I mean, it's a huge thing. How you deal with family, with the family issue in Greece. But I don't know if it's only in Greece, to be honest. But here, I think at some point, this new generation of directors wanted somehow to deal with this subject because I think it was unbearable. Or I think it was something that we were somehow living under this thing that is called family, and it is something unsolved and difficult.
At least they didn't want to be idealized anymore, right?
Because no,
side of there is an idealization.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, which was very brave from their side, and they didn't want to, to somehow they had to deal with that, and it was very nice that this happened, and we were all part of this.
Yeah. Do we have? Yes, we have a question over here.
Hi, thank you so much for organizing this. I was just curious, since we have Aggeliki with us, and I had the chance to be here for Alps earlier this week. I was curious. I was curious, how does the sort of like social realism and this like very raw realism of Economidis compare to the absurd worlds that Lanthimos builds, and from like a creative process point of view as well, what are the challenges of having to be like having to feel so real in the case of Economidis, and having to come across as so detached maybe in the case of Lanthimos?
Did you hear the question?
This I heard. This is very nice because I am very lucky. I've worked with different directors that want to create different universes in their films, which is something that I really like. So each time I try to dive into the universe of the director, and each time I try somehow to be in tune of the film. So I try to realize the tone of each film and the atmosphere of each film. And of course, Alps is a totally different film than Matchbox, and we've worked with Yorgos again and again, and from Dogtooth already I realized that it was a totally different way of working, and it had to do mostly with being there, but not detached. Maybe detached is something that you see as an audience, and I understand that, but the process is totally different. The process is being there, but being less expressive, let's say. So I think it has to do with how much or how do I express what I want to express? And it has to do with also the tone. Let's say in Economidis, a film in Matchbox, the volume is high, while in Yorgos the volume is low. It doesn't mean that this is something that the actor does something less. The actor has to do the same function, but then the tone changes, or how much you express, or how you open yourself, or what you show or what you don't show. So it's, for me, it was very useful, these experiences, because really I tried myself in totally different ways of approaching and acting, which is for me like a gift, you know, because then I somehow challenge myself into different styles and different approaches of filming, or of being as an actress.
Thank you. Yes, we have another question.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned Cassavetes, that the director was a big fan of his, because I've seen a lot of his films and I had the same sort of mixed feelings about watching this as with the Cassavetes, and I was wondering whether you thought it was, to me it often seems to be a function of improvised style, that if you don't know what to say next, then if in doubt, start shouting at someone or insulting them, and then the whole pace ratchets up, and then the other person shouts back or thinks of something else to be abusive. You find a lot of those sequences, certainly in the Cassavetes films, and certainly in this one, it was relentless. And it's interesting you said that the director was encouraging that. I'm guessing maybe Cassavetes did it as well, but I always have mixed feelings about that, because it seems to turn it into something, as the compere said, more unrealistic, but hyper real, because it is so relentless. There's no variation. And I mean, did the director ever say to you at times, no, tone it down a bit, because as I say, it does seem to be often so relentless that it is that a function, is that a natural tendency when you're improvising, that, you know, if in doubt, shout at someone, or, you know, be abusive? And then, because it happens in some other British films as well. I thought there's one about a kitchen, a chef, and I thought it's just going too far. You may not have seen it, but anyway, I suppose the question is that a natural tendency when you're improvising, or is it possible to have more modulations when you're being told just do what comes naturally, or what be spontaneous? Because these films tend to be scripted as well afterwards, so there are differences, but I have found that, especially with ones like Cassavetes and early Scorsese, they're just shouting and abusing each other all the time. And does it become hyper real rather than realistic? And is that the intention anyway?
Thank you.
Can you repeat a bit, because I lost some?
Is it something related to the improvisation and going into higher and higher tones, if improvisation facilitates this, of getting in higher and higher realism? Is that the question, if improvisation facilitates that? Yeah, do you find that when you are improvise, it naturally escalates to more aggression or higher tone, or no?
Okay. Oh, no, I wouldn't say that. I would say that we were improvising, and then at some point, Yannis, the director, was telling us, yeah, but if he wanted something to go like more aggressively, or something that didn't work and we had to do it again, then he was just saying us that, yeah, but this time, like, when you, let's say something, then answer higher.
So
it was more
direction. So it was his specific direction, not necessarily part of the improvising process.
Yeah, because you can also improvise, and sometimes you can improvise and be very funny, or the outcome is it's like comedy, or you can improvise and then it doesn't mean that you improvise and you always fight. But since that was his suggestion, or that where he wanted the scene to end, he was suggesting that, yeah, but now what you say is not enough, and what the other person says is not enough. So each time you have to convince him or her even more and more and more. So this was something that was accelerating, actually, the idea that you would always disagree with the other person, and you would want to impose your own will or your own ideas, or that you were the one that was right and the other one was always wrong. So that kind of ideas was like telling us, and based on that we would improvise. That every person in that family was a very egocentric person, so always it was me that was right and you are always wrong, and I believe that you are wrong and I will prove you that you are wrong. So keep doing that, you keep doing that, and then after a while you start shout. Yeah, and because I am the, and you are not, and it is based a lot on this power game of I know and you don't know, and since I know, you have to do what I will tell you. It was always that kind of game, or that kind of thing, that based on that we were improvising. So that led to shouting, because being all the time aggressive.
Escalating. Thank you.
And escalating, exactly.
Another question? Maybe the last one.
Hiya.
Hi.
A lot of the relationships that are in the film feel very kind of siloed from one another. So I felt like everyone was very locked in their own little rooms in the house, and it was really only kind of through the father that the people came together. In the improvisation, were there relationships or kind of discussions or interactions between the other characters that were then considered to be out of scope for this film? So like, did you have a scene where you had a conversation with the mother, or where Kiki had an argument with her brother? And was there a reason that it was all centering more around the father than the other relationships and dynamics within the family?
If I remember well, we had also some other improvisations that, it was like me and my mother, or me and my brother. But it was, if I remember well, it was less that these improvisations. Most of them had to do with our relationship with the father, and how we were surrounding him. Or I remember also that we were doing sometimes some rehearsals, it was me and the father, just the two of us. And some other rehearsal, it was me, the mother, and the father. But yeah, I think me and my brother alone, I think we were never alone. It was me, my brother, and the mother, or me, my brother, and the father. But I think most of all, it had to do with really trying to create the relationship with the father, and how he would react, or how he would manipulate us or not, or how the mother would help us or not. It had to do, I think, that was he was the central somehow character, so we had to be around him all the time. And sometimes, I remember also that we were really trying to understand how and why these people are so wasted, in a way that you know, they just, they cannot stand themselves and they cannot stand the others. And we were always trying to find a way somehow to escape from this isolated bubble, but it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy. And then at some point we realized that these people are all together there and they just eating each other like you know, like animals. They cannot escape, and they are, there is a bond there. And
this is
sorry.
very interesting what you're saying, because
Sorry?
this is very interesting what you're saying right now, because in theory, if they hate each other so much, somebody can walk out at any time. But there's an addiction in this toxic dynamic, isn't it? That's what he's showing. And this you can see in the worst situations in the Greek society.
Exactly. This is why also it's called like Matchbox, but they are like in a box and they are in there and they cannot go out.
Yeah.
And this is what we discovered while we were rehearsing again and again, that there is this strong toxic bond, and it's not easy. Although we were saying that my character Kiki, after a while, she will get married and she will go away and she will have a family and she will do the same to her own family. But still, sorry?
She had her own little matchbox, yeah.
Exactly. But still, we realized that these people are like stuck together and they're living like that every day.
Aggeliki. Oh, yes, I cannot resist that. Okay, last one.
Of course, of course.
Yes, Aggeliki. So I have just one question in terms of the language and the racism and the offensive language by the characters. And I was wondering a couple of things, like if there was a limit or a boundary to to what extent you can go, or did an actor have a personal boundary, like I don't want to say that, or that's offensive? And if not, would the same, like obviously that's 20 years ago, do you think that society's changed? And if not, would the same film be made today when we all try and be more politically correct and not offensive, you know, not laugh when there's racist slurs? And I'm just wondering, in Greece, do you think that this day and age, people would challenge that? Like, would you be comfortable making that film today and improvising in the same way?
Well, for Yanis, the language is something very, very powerful. I remember that he was talking to us a lot about how language and how violent language is like a tool of psychological, psychological power. And he wanted the characters to be that ugly and that edgy in terms of language and in the way they use language. It was, on purpose, of course. And I think for Yanis, for the director, the psychological violence is even more important than physical violence. And I think he thinks that this is a weapon, that it is somehow extremely toxic and powerful, and he wants to use that kind of weapon in his films through language. And yeah, back then, of course, I don't know if today I would feel that comfortable, to be honest. I don't know.
I think, sorry, like to barge in again, but a lot of the films by Ken Loach or other films, sometimes the characters are challenged within the film by someone else from the other side, or there's a dialogue or a conversation, or this thing that we tend to sort of view a certain class from another perspective. We're not in that. Some people make films not like from a very high middle class, or kind of depict working class in a certain way, not from within that working class. But I feel in a lot of those films, it's challenged, it's showing society like having a dialogue in certain ways, so you leave thinking, okay, like I get, but I just felt in this film not that part, the racism wasn't challenged by other people. A couple of the stereotypes were challenged, like the sexism or the misogyny, but I felt particularly that went sort of unchallenged. And I think like maybe today it would be more challenged, maybe like he could make a film like that, but there could be another character challenging it. I don't know, it's just a thought. Yeah. Thank you though. Thanks so much.
Yeah, maybe. I think if you watch his films that he did after Matchbox, there is that kind of challenge that you are talking about even more. I don't know if you will be able to watch his latest films, because also he has evolved and he has changed. And I think that is more obvious in his later films.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aggeliki. Thanks very much for jumping in and having this incredible conversation. Aggeliki is at the moment in this amazing film, To a Land Unknown. I don't know if some of you have watched it. It's selling out here at the Garden Cinema, so you can catch there as well. It's amazing. Thank you, Aggeliki.
Thank you. Bye.
Just to let you know, this is the second film of the season. You can